September 18th, 2022. Istanbul, Turkey. The grand final of Valorant Champions, the biggest stage in the game's history. Loud, a Brazilian team that nobody outside South America had fully believed in before this tournament, are one win away from becoming world champions. Their opponents are Optic Gaming, the most dominant team in North America, the favorites, the team that had already beaten Loud at Masters Reykjavik earlier that year. The crowd in the Volkswagen Arena is loud and split. On the server, a 19-year-old from Brazil is about to do something that nobody who was there will ever forget. His name is Erick Santos. The scene calls him ASPAS. And for the next 4 maps, he is going to play Valorant at a level that makes one of the best teams in the world look like they're playing against someone they simply have no answer for. 71 kills across the series, 248 average combat score, Grand Finals MVP, world champion, 19 years old. And here is the thing about that moment in Istanbul that makes the story worth telling from the very beginning. Nobody saw it coming. Not from ASPAS specifically, not from Loud, not from South America. Because in 2022, the world's eyes were on North America, on Europe, on the established powerhouses. Brazil was on the map, but nobody had penciled them in as world champions. The kid from Brazil had other plans. He always did. To understand ASPAS, you need to understand where he comes from. And that means understanding something about Brazil that most people outside the country don't fully picture when they think about Brazilian esports. Erick Santos grew up in a Brazil where gaming wasn't a clear path to anything, where the infrastructure for competitive esports was thin, the prize money for regional tournaments was small, and the route from good player in a local server to professional competing internationally was not a pipeline so much as a series of walls you had to break through one by one. The fact that ASPAS even got to the professional scene at all is not a given. It is a testament. He started with Counter-Strike. Before Valorant existed, before Loud existed, before any of the trophies or records, ASPAS was grinding CSGO in Brazil under the name ASPAS, competing for small regional teams, learning the fundamentals of a tactical shooter the same way everyone learns, by playing thousands of hours and losing a lot before you win. There's a detail from this period that tells you something about him. He reportedly received an 8-year ban on the Brazilian competitive platform Gamers Club for violating terms of service. He was a teenager. The ban came and went. He kept playing. The obstacle was just another thing to get past. When Valorant launched in 2020, ASPAS made the switch quickly. He was 17. The game was new, the competitive scene was forming in real time, and the question every young player in Brazil was asking was the same. Is this the game where I make it? For ASPAS, the answer started taking shape almost immediately. He played for a team called Favela Aimers, and then signed with Slick for the first VCT Brazil Challengers events in 2021. Slick didn't make it to international events. They eventually disbanded. But ASPAS was noticeable. The kind of noticeable that doesn't need a good team to be visible. His aim was discussed before his name was widely known. The Brazilian ranked scene has always been brutal. Loud, fast, aggressive, full of players who would rather die swinging than survive cautiously. That environment produced ASPAS, an entry fragger who peaks before you expect him to, who plays duels he has no business winning,
and wins them anyway, who moves through a map with the kind of confidence that either means the player is delusional or the player is genuinely on a different level. With ASPAS, it was always the second one.
Loud came calling in February 2022, and here is the context for why that matters. Loud was not just an esports team. Loud was a cultural moment in Brazilian media. The organization had built one of the most engaged fan bases in the country across multiple games, and their entry into Valorant was treated like an event. They signed a roster that was immediately one of the most talked about in the region. Sadak as the IGL, Les, Tweez, Pancada, and ASPAS as the duelist. The average age of that roster was barely 20. And from the very first tournament, they were something different. VCT Brazil Stage 1 challengers, first place. Stage 2 challengers, first place. Loud won both Brazilian splits without dropping a map in the finals. They had qualified for Masters Reykjavik 2022, their first international event, with a perfect domestic record. And when they arrived in Iceland, the international scene had its first real look at what Brazil could do. They went to the grand final. They lost to Optic 0-3. It stung, but they had been there. And ASPAS, at 18 years old, had played on the biggest stage Valorant had at the time and shown everyone what his ceiling looked like. Then came Istanbul and the rematch. Here is what made Champions 2022 different from Reykjavik. Loud came back, not just as the same team who had lost, as a team that had processed the loss, studied the team that beat them, and came back to an even bigger stage with something to prove. And ASPAS came back as someone who had spent 6 months since Iceland thinking about what it meant to lose a final like that. The tournament run was clinical. Loud moved through groups and then through the bracket with the kind of controlled aggression that made teams feel like they were always slightly behind. And every time a map got tight, every time the round count was close and the momentum was shifting, ASPAS would do something that changed the terms of the situation. A clutch on Breeze in the 12th round that kept a map alive that should have been over. A jet play on Haven that had casters stopping mid-sentence. The specific quality that separated him from other elite duelists wasn't just mechanical. It was the timing. He knew when to be the one to take the fight. He knew when a team needed a player to create something from nothing. And round after round, he was that player. Grand final. Optic again, the team that had swept them 6 months earlier. Loud won 3-1. And when the trophy was lifted and ASPAS was named MVP, the Brazilian crowd, watching from thousands of miles away, lost their minds in a way that was about more than Valorant. It was about Brazil, about a region that had been doubted and dismissed, reaching the top of the world and staying there. The kid from the favela aimers, the teenager who got CS banned and kept going, was a world champion. What followed 2022 was the kind of test that separates players who peaked at exactly the right moment from players who are genuinely great. Because winning once is a story. What you do after that is the character test. 2023 with Loud was complicated. The team remained one of the most dangerous rosters in the Americas, but the new franchised VCT structure created a different kind of competitive pressure. Every week on the league stage against the same teams, grinding a regular season format instead of the tournament-by-tournament chaos that had suited Loud's style. ASPAS was still himself. VCT Americas League 2023,
first place. And ASPAS named America's MVP, the first person ever to win that award. Most kills in the entire VCT 2023 regular season. Most multi-kills. The individual numbers were there. The deep international run wasn't. Champions 2023 ended at third place. Good. Not what they wanted. And then, at the end of 2023, ASPAS left loud. The departure was the most significant moment of his career since Istanbul. And at the time, almost nobody was sure it was the right move. Sadak, the IGL who had built Loud's system around ASPAS's ability to create, was staying. The team identity was staying. ASPAS was going to Leviathan, a Chilean organization, a different culture, a new set of teammates, a fresh start in every sense. The community reaction was immediate and loud. Why? Why leave the team that made you a world champion? Why leave Sadak, who had called the rounds that let you be who you are? Why risk it? The answer ASPAS gave was about growth, about needing a new challenge, about not wanting to plateau inside a comfort zone. Whether you agree with the reasoning or not, the follow-up was hard to argue with. 2024 with Leviathan. And this is where the GOAT conversation starts getting genuinely serious. VCT Americas Stage 1, 2024. ASPAS against Sentinels. The most famous team in North American Valorant. The team with tens. The team that always draws the most eyes. And ASPAS, on a single map, records 47 kills. 47 in a single map. A VCT record that had never been approached before. The community reaction was somewhere between celebration and bewilderment. 47 kills on one map. The record for most kills in a single VCT map in the game's history. Against Sentinels. In a regular season match that he turned into one of the most watched clips of the year. Then, VCT Americas Stage 2. First place with Leviathan. Second consecutive VCT Americas MVP. The only player to ever win that award. And then, 78 kills in a single best-of-3 series against Cloud9, which at the time was the record for most kills in a series in Valorant history. He broke that record himself in 2025, posting 82 kills in 66 rounds against Crew, without overtime. He reportedly said his wife's breakfast was the secret that day. The community loved him for that. Champions 2024. Third place with Leviathan. Another near miss at a second world title. Close, but the ceiling didn't come down. And then, November 2024, ASPAS moves again. This time to MIBR. Back to Brazil. Back to a Brazilian organization. The third major team of his career, and the one that brings him home in the most literal sense. The reception from the Brazilian fan base was electric. Because ASPAS at MIBR isn't just a roster signing, it's a statement. It's the best player in the Americas joining the most historic Brazilian CS and Valorant brand, building something that feels bigger than a single tournament. Champions 2025 with MIBR. ASPAS posts a 1.33 rating, the highest ever recorded at a Champions event. Against NRG, in a single best-of-3 series, 80 kills. An international record for most kills in a series at a global event. VCT Americas MVP for 2025. The third time. The only player in history to win it once. He has now won it 3 consecutive times. 3. The award didn't exist before 2023. He has won every single edition of it.
And now, the partnership that your community noticed. ATK Gear. The keyboard company that builds hardware for professional players came to ASPAS not to slap his name on a product, but to build something with him from scratch. He was specific about that in the announcement. He said he had spent almost a year using and evaluating their keyboards before he said anything publicly, because he understood the responsibility of recommending peripherals to players who trust him. Not a fast deal, not a logo placement, a co-developed product. The result is the ATK RS6, a Hall effect keyboard built to his specifications, tested on the professional stage, tuned with his direct input on switch feel and actuation. He used it during VCT Americas Stage 1, when Leviathan qualified for Masters Toronto. The keyboard has his custom presets built in. It ships with his transparent keycap set. The collaboration name is literally ATK and ASPAS, his name on the product, not just in the marketing copy. For a player as private and careful about his public image as ASPAS, that kind of endorsement means something. He doesn't do it if he doesn't believe it. The GOAT conversation in Valorant has been happening since 2022, and every year it gets harder to make the case against ASPAS. The counterarguments are usually the same. He has one world championship. TENS won Masters Reykjavik and Madrid, and is more famous globally. Other players have been more consistent across longer stretches. All of those arguments are real, and ASPAS himself would probably agree with some of them. He has always been more focused on the game in front of him than on the legacy being written around him. But here is what the numbers say. He is the only player in history to win VCT Americas MVP every single year it has been awarded. He holds the record for most kills in a single VCT map, most kills in a VCT Best of 3 series, most kills in an international Best of 3 series, the highest rating ever posted at a Champions event, the Grand Finals MVP from 2022, VCT Global MVP from the TENS Community Awards in 2026, voted on by players and coaches from every region. And through all of it, 3 different teams, 3 different systems, 3 different IGLs, the individual output has never meaningfully dropped. There is a phrase that gets used about players like ASPAS that usually sounds like an exaggeration, but in his case lands as a simple description. He doesn't disappear. In a game where the meta shifts every few months, where agents get nerfed and reworked, and the viable duelist pool shrinks and expands, ASPAS has never gone through a stretch where you watch him play and think, he's just surviving this. He is always the most dangerous player on his side of the server. Not the loudest, not the most decorated with titles in any given year. The most dangerous. There is a difference, and his opponents feel it. The detail that ties everything together is the team name he played for before any of this. Favela Aimers. A team name that is self-aware about exactly where Brazilian gaming talent comes from. The streets, the community servers, the ranked lobbies where you learn by playing against people who are trying to embarrass you. And you either get better or you stop playing. ASPAS got better. He kept getting better. He moved from CS to Valorant, from Slick to Loud to Leviathan to MIB, from local tournaments nobody watched to grand finals in Istanbul with the whole world paying attention. The name on his first professional team was a joke and a statement at the same time. He turned it into a prophecy. Erick ASPAS Santos. Born June 15th, 2003 in Brazil. 22 years old. 1 world championship. 3 consecutive VCT Americas MVPs.
the only player to ever win it at all. VCT records for kills on a single map, kills in a series, kills at an international event. The highest champions rating in history. A co-developed keyboard with ATK gear that bears his name and was tested on the pro stage. A fan base that treats his performances the way people in other countries treat their national football teams. And a second world title that, every time you watch him play, feels like a matter of when rather than if. The Favela Aimers kid is not done yet. He's just getting started.